Deep beneath the shifting sands of modern Iraq, thousands of clay tablets wait in silence. These are the oldest stories ever recorded by human hands, etched in cuneiform characters that bridge the gap between gods and men. They speak of a time long before the first city rises, an era when the earth belongs only to the Anunnaki. These powerful figures descend from the heavens to a wild, untamed planet. They do not arrive as masters of an empire, but as laborers tasked with a monumental burden. They dig the rivers, clear the marshes, and mine the depths of the earth. For ages, they toil in a world without humanity, reshaping the very geography of the landscape. But as the centuries pass, the weight of their divine labor begins to fracture their resolve. The tablets reveal a hidden history of celestial struggle that precedes the birth of our species. The world before the arrival of the Anunnaki is a masterpiece of geological patience. It is a place where time is measured not in hours or days, but in the slow drift of continents and the rise and fall of mountain ranges. The atmosphere is a thick, humid veil that clings to the surface of a planet still cooling from its chaotic birth. Massive, towering trees that would dwarf the redwoods of today dominate the land, their roots gripping a soil that has never known the bite of a shovel. In the oceans, creatures of staggering size and strange physiology glide through the depths, their lives governed only by the primal cycles of hunger and reproduction. This is a world of pure biological instinct, a green and blue sphere vibrating with life but devoid of consciousness as we understand it. There is no language here. There are no stories. There is only the wind, the waves, and the occasional roar of a predator echoing through the dense canopy of the prehistoric jungle. Then the silence is broken. It is not a sound from the earth itself, but a vibration from the heavens. The Sumerian records, etched into clay thousands of years later, speak of a moment when the sky opened. They describe the descent of beings who possessed knowledge and power far beyond the comprehension of any terrestrial creature. These were the Anunnaki. In the literal translation of the ancient tongue, their name means those who from heaven to earth came. They do not arrive as explorers seeking a new home, nor as tourists admiring the view. They arrive as a workforce on a desperate mission of planetary preservation. The tablets tell us that their home world, Nibiru, is suffering. Its protective layer of atmosphere is thinning, allowing the warmth of its sun to escape and the cold of deep space to bleed in. Their scientists have determined that the only way to save their civilization is to create a massive artificial shield in their upper atmosphere. To do this, they require an immense quantity of gold. This metal, rare and precious to us today, was for them a vital industrial resource. Its ability to reflect radiation and conduct energy made it the only substance capable of mending their broken sky. They scanned the heavens, and their eyes fell upon the third planet from the sun. Earth was rich with the very element they needed. The first expeditionary force is led by Enki. In the documentary of our minds, we can see him standing on the bridge of a craft as it breaks through the Earth's clouds. He is a figure of immense intellect and complicated morality. As the Lord of the deep waters, he is tasked with finding the best locations for extraction. He chooses the fertile plains of Mesopotamia as his base. This region, the cradle of what would eventually become human civilization, is at this time a sprawling marshland fed by the great rivers. Here, Enki establishes Eridu. It is the first city, though it is not a city of people. It is a technological hub, a gleaming spire of metal and stone rising out of the reeds. The early days of the occupation are characterized by a sense of isolation. The Anunnaki are millions of miles from home, operating on a planet with a gravity and an atmosphere that, while breathable, is heavy and taxing. They are not alone, however. They have brought with them a class of servants known as the Ijiji. These are the rank and file workers of the celestial host. If the Anunnaki are the architects and generals, the Ijiji are the miners and the laborers. They are the ones who must descend into the dark places of the earth to claim the gold. The mining operations are focused on the southern regions of the African continent, a place the texts call the Abzu. This is not a surface mine. It is a deep subterranean effort. The Ijiji are forced to tunnel into the crust of the earth, carving out vast galleries and shafts. They work in conditions that are grueling and claustrophobic. For thousands of years, the Ijiji carry out this task. The Sumerian tablets are specific about the duration, mentioning periods of time that span generations of human life, though to the long-lived Anunnaki, these may have been seen as mere shifts in a long day. As the work continues, the physical landscape of the earth begins to change. The Anunnaki are not content to live in the mud. They use their advanced technology to drain the marshes, building a network of canals that serve both as transport routes for the ore and as a means of controlling the unpredictable flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates. They are terraforming the planet. They are imposing a geometric order on the chaotic wilderness. The rivers are straightened. The forests are cleared to make way for landing pads and storehouses. The earth is being turned into a factory. In the north, another figure looms large in the narrative. Enlil, the brother of Enki, is granted lordship over the command center. While Enki is comfortable in the wet, dark places of the world and among the technical details of the mines, Enlil is a creature of the heights. He is the lord of the air and the decree. He is a stern, often cold leader who views the mission with a singular focus. To Enlil, the earth is nothing more than a resource to be exploited. He has no interest in the local flora or fauna, and he certainly has no affection for the laboring Ijiji. He represents the administrative pressure of the home world, constantly demanding higher yields and faster results. The relationship between the two brothers is strained from the beginning. They represent two different philosophies of governance. Enki is the innovator, the one who seeks to understand the world he is transforming. Enlil is the traditionalist, the one who seeks to dominate it. This rivalry will eventually shape the course of human history, but in these pre-human millennia, it is a cold war of divine egos played out against the backdrop of an industrial wasteland. The Ijiji, meanwhile, are reaching their limit. The texts describe their toil in vivid detail. They dig the trenches, they clear the silt, and they weep as they work. They are gods, yet they are being used as beasts of burden. They look up at the stars, seeing their home planet of Nibiru whenever it passes near, and they feel a deep, burning resentment. They have been on Earth for 40 periods, a duration that has worn down even their immortal patience. They begin to gather in the shadows of the mines. They begin to speak of rebellion. The world they inhabit is a strange mixture of the ancient and the futuristic. While the Ijiji use tools that can cut through solid rock like water, the world around them remains savage. There are no roads between the mining camps, only the dangerous trails through the bush where predators lie in wait. The Anunnaki must contend with the fierce climate, the massive storms that roll across the plains, and the geological instability of a young planet. They are masters of the sky, but on the ground, they are still subject to the laws of nature. The Sumerian texts suggest that this era lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. It is a period of history that is entirely absent from our conventional textbooks. In the standard narrative, this time is occupied by the slow evolution of primates and the gradual cooling of the earth. But the tablets tell a story of a planet that was already being managed and exploited by an interstellar power. They describe a complex social structure, a hierarchy of beings with their own politics, their own grievances, and their own desperate needs. As the Ijiji labor in the Abzu, the gold continues to flow. It is processed in the Mesopotamian cities and loaded onto the great chariots that ferry it into orbit. From there, it is sent across the void to Nibiru. The plan is working. The atmosphere of their home world is being repaired. But the price of this success is a growing instability on Earth. The Ijiji are no longer content to be the silent engines of someone else's survival. They are beginning to realize that they have the power to stop the wheels of industry. The tension reaches a fever pitch. The Ijiji decide that they will no longer carry the basket. They will no longer dig the soil. They plan an act of defiance that will force the hand of the great Anunnaki. They set fire to their tools. They surround the dwelling of Enlil in the middle of the night, their torches lighting up the darkness of the Mesopotamian plain. This is the first labor strike in the history of the world, and it is a strike of the gods themselves. The Earth, once a silent spectator to the cosmic drama, has become a place of conflict. The primordial silence is gone forever. In its place is the sound of an uprising. The Anunnaki are faced with a choice. They can go to war with their own kind, or they can find a new way to get the gold they so desperately need. The solution they choose will lead to the creation of a new kind of being. But before that moment of creation, there is only the standoff in the dark, the burning tools, and the realization that the world will never be the same. The descent was only the beginning. The struggle for the Earth has truly begun. This segment of history, hidden within the cuneiform script, reveals that we were not the first to call this planet home, nor were we the first to toil upon its surface. We are the successors to a much older, much more celestial struggle. The gold that still sits in our vaults and hangs from our necks is a reminder of a time when the Earth was nothing more than a mine, and the gods themselves were the miners. The primordial silence had been broken by the boots of the Anunnaki, and the echoes of their arrival still resonate through the halls of time. The landscape they shaped, the rivers they diverted, and the cities they built laid the invisible foundations for everything that followed. We walk upon the ground they cleared. We drink from the water sources they harnessed. Even as we look to the stars and wonder if we are alone, the ancient texts suggest that the stars have already been here, and they left their mark on the very bones of the world. The era of the Anunnaki before humans was a time of epic scale, a period where the destiny of two worlds was tied together by a single shining element. And as the Ijiji stood before Enlil's gate with their torches held high, the silence of the earth was replaced by the first demands for justice, a cry that would eventually be inherited by the species yet to be born. The dawn of the first day was over. The long, industrial night of the pre-human Earth was reaching its climax. The Anunnaki, the lords of the heavens, were about to become the creators of a new world, not out of love or curiosity, but out of the cold, hard necessity of a labor force that had finally said no. The story of what happened next is the story of our own beginning, but it is rooted in the silence and the sweat of those who came before. In the deep, dark veins of the Abzu and the marshy plains of Eridu, the blueprint of our existence was being drawn in the dirt by the hands of beings who saw the earth not as a home, but as a project. This was the world before us, a world of gods and fire, of gold and rebellion, spinning silently in the void, waiting for the first breath of man. The air hangs heavy over the Mesopotamian basin. The fires of the Ijiji reflect in the waters of the newly carved canals. The stars of Nibiru shine coldly above, indifferent to the suffering on the ground. This is the turning point. The silence of the primordial earth is not just broken, it is shattered. The era of the Anunnaki as the sole occupants of this world is drawing to a close, and the shadow of a new creation is beginning to fall across the land. The transition from the age of the gods to the age of man is about to begin, sparked by a mutiny in the minds and a desperate need for a new way to survive. The Golden Age was not an age of peace, but an age of extraction, and its legacy is written in the very soil beneath our feet. As the leaders of the Anunnaki gather in their council to address the crisis, the earth itself seems to wait. The great beasts of the field continue their aimless wandering, unaware that their world is about to be populated by a new kind of creature, one made in the image of the masters but born to do the work of the slaves. The decision made in that council chamber, thousands of years before the first city of man was ever built, would echo through every civilization that followed. The pre-human history of the earth is a story of cosmic necessity, of celestial desperation, and of the first sparks of rebellion that would one day define the human spirit. We are the children of that rebellion, the descendants of a solution to an ancient industrial crisis, living in the ruins of a divine outpost that was once the most important site in the galaxy. The silence is gone, and in its place, the story of humanity begins. The sky over the ancient Near East is not yet the sky of man. It is a vast, unblemished canopy of indigo and gold, indifferent to the life teeming in the waters below. According to the clay records found in the ruins of Nineveh and Nippur, this stillness is shattered by the arrival of the Anunnaki. They do not appear as ghosts or spirits, but as physical beings crossing the threshold of the atmosphere. The texts describe their descent as a purposeful journey, a voyage necessitated by the needs of their home. They are the children of Anu, the supreme lord of the heavens, and they are led by Enki, the prince of the waters and the master of wisdom. As their vessels touch the marshy soil of what we now call southern Iraq, the landscape is a labyrinth of reeds and shifting tides. The Persian Gulf extends much further inland than it does today. The air is thick with humidity and the scent of brackish water. Here, at the edge of the world, the first footfall occurs. It is not the footfall of a hunter or a gatherer, but of a god. The tablets tell us that the first place they settle is Eridu, a name that means the place built far away. It is the first city, though at this stage it is more of a colonial outpost, a base of operations for a mission that will span millennia. Enki, the leader of this first expedition, surveys the land. He is a figure of immense intellect and practical skill. In the Sumerian tradition, he is the one who organizes the world. He finds the earth in a state of wild disarray. The rivers wander without purpose. The plains are prone to devastating floods. To the Anunnaki, this is not a garden, but a resource to be managed. The mission is industrial in its scope, yet divine in its execution. The early Sumerian poems, such as the myth of Enki and the world order, describe him marking out the boundaries, establishing the roles of the lesser deities, and bringing a sense of celestial architecture to the chaotic wilderness. The atmosphere of this era is one of profound isolation. There are no other civilizations to greet them. There are no kings to offer tribute. There is only the wind and the relentless sun. The Anunnaki are portrayed as beings of light and stature, clad in garments that reflect the sun, carrying tools that the later Sumerians would struggle to describe in their limited vocabulary. They are the first engineers. They do not pray for rain. They build the systems that control the flow of the water. They are here to work, but the work is not shared equally. In the hierarchy of these sky gods, there exists a division that will eventually lead to the greatest crisis in their history. At the top are the Anunnaki, the great gods who decree the fates. Below them are the Igigi, a younger generation of deities who are tasked with the manual labor of the mission. For thousands of years, long before the first human bone is ever buried in the earth, the Igigi are the ones who sweat under the Mesopotamian sun. They are the ones who dig the beds of the Tigris and the Euphrates. They are the ones who clear the marshes and raise the foundations of the first temples. The scale of this labor is difficult to comprehend. The Sumerian tablets speak of the gods toiling for 40 periods. Whether these periods represent years, centuries, or millennia is a matter of intense debate among scholars. But the sentiment remains the same. The earth is being reshaped by hand and by tool. The Igigi are digging the great life-giving arteries of the land, creating the irrigation channels that will one day allow human civilization to flourish. But for now, there is no one to feed but themselves. They are working to sustain the colony and to extract the wealth of the planet. Enki establishes his seat of power in the Abzu. In the myths, the Abzu is often described as a subterranean realm of fresh water, a place of mystery and deep knowledge. In a documentary sense, we can view the Abzu as the heart of the Anunnaki operation. It is here that Enki keeps the me, the divine blueprints or programs that contain the laws of civilization, technology, and governance. These are not merely abstract concepts. They are described as physical objects, tablets or discs that can be handled and transported. They represent the high technology of the gods, the operating system for the new world they are building. The landscape begins to change under their influence. The wild, unpredictable marshes around Eridu are tamed. Stone is brought from distant mountains, and the first permanent structures begin to rise. These are not the mud brick huts of primitive man. These are the homes of the gods, built with a precision that defies the tools of the later Bronze Age. The text suggests that these early settlements are illuminated by a light that does not come from fire, and that the gates are guarded by mechanisms that respond only to the commands of the Anunnaki. While Enki manages the waters and the construction, his brother Enlil arrives to take command of the atmosphere and the terrestrial administration. Enlil is a different kind of leader. Where Enki is creative and often sympathetic, Enlil is stern, a master of discipline and order. He represents the authority of their home world, ensuring that the mission stays on track. The tension between these two brothers, the scientist and the general, becomes the driving force behind the events that follow. Enlil looks at the earth as a workplace. Enki begins to look at it as a home. The Igigi continue their grueling work. They are dredging the rivers, and the weight of the earth they move is staggering. The tablets describe them complaining about the backbreaking nature of the task. They are gods, yet they are being treated as slaves. They question why they must carry the baskets of soil while the great Anunnaki sit in their temples and decree the fates. This period of Earth's history is characterized by a growing celestial unrest. The silence of the planet is now filled with the rhythmic sound of shovels and the murmurs of a disgruntled workforce. As the centuries pass, the Anunnaki expand their reach. They are not confined to Eridu. They establish other centers of operation, each with a specific function. One city is dedicated to healing, another to metalworking, another to the observation of the stars. The Earth is becoming a giant laboratory. They study the plants, the animals, and the cycles of the seasons. They are looking for something specific, something that the Earth possesses in abundance. The most common interpretation of the ancient texts suggests they are here for gold. In the modern era, some theorists propose this gold was needed to create a shield in the atmosphere of their home planet, but the Sumerian records simply emphasize its value and the necessity of its extraction. The extraction process is what finally breaks the Ijiji. They have spent ages digging into the mountains and the riverbeds. They have seen the beauty of the earth, but they have only experienced it through the lens of exhaustion. The documentary record of the Atrahasis epic provides a vivid account of their rebellion. They set fire to their tools. They surround the dwelling of Enlil in the night, their torches lighting up the darkness. The sky gods are suddenly faced with a mutiny. The workers have laid down their shovels, and the mission is at a standstill. This moment is the turning point in the story of the Anunnaki. It is the moment when the sky gods realize that they cannot continue as they have. The earth is vast, the resources are plentiful, but the cost of the labor is too high. The Great Voyage has succeeded in touching the soil and establishing a foothold, but it has failed to create a sustainable system. The gods are at an impasse. Enlil wants to punish the rebels, but Enki, ever the innovator, proposes a different solution. He suggests a new kind of worker, one that can take the burden from the Ijiji. But before that solution can be realized, we must understand the world as it existed during the height of the Ijiji toil. It was a world of strange beauty and terrifying power. The Anunnaki walked among the megafauna of the post-glacial age. They witnessed the shifting of the continents and the rising of the seas. They were the witnesses to a planet in flux, and they were the ones who attempted to freeze that flux into a structured, manageable reality. Their presence on Earth before the arrival of man was not a brief visit, but a long, difficult era of colonization and engineering. The ruins of their first cities are now buried under layers of silt and sand, but the memory of their arrival remains etched in the oldest writings of our species. The Sumerians did not claim to have invented civilization. They claimed they were taught it by those who came before. They spoke of a time when the gods lived alone on the earth, when the work was hard and the reward was a planet reshaped in the image of the heavens. This is the era of the Great Voyage, a time when the sky gods touched the soil and found that the soil was heavy, demanding, and full of secrets. The foundation has been laid, the rivers have been carved, and the cities have been built. The stage is set for the next act in the cosmic drama, an act that will change the face of the earth forever. The air is heavy with the scent of salt and decaying vegetation as the first of the great sky travelers descend into the marshlands of the southern Mesopotamian delta. This is a world of reeds, silt, and endless water, where the horizon blurs the line between the turquoise sky and the shimmering Persian Gulf. The landscape is primordial and untamed, a vast expanse of wetlands that shows no sign of the complex civilizations that will one day occupy its soil. It is into this wild, watery frontier that Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom and water, steps forth to claim the land. According to the ancient cuneiform tablets, this moment marks the transition from a planet of untouched nature to one of celestial industry. The texts describe the arrival as an organized expedition rather than a casual descent. These beings, known as the Anunnaki, do not arrive as tourists or explorers seeking wonder. They arrive as architects and engineers with a specific mandate. Their first objective is the establishment of a foothold, a base of operations that can sustain their presence on a planet that is fundamentally different from their home. They choose the edge of the marshes, where the fresh water of the rivers meets the salt water of the sea. This location is not accidental. It is the site of the Abzu, the subterranean realm of fresh water that Enki is said to command. Here, they begin the construction of the very first city on Earth, a place called Eridu. Eridu is a name that echoes through the millennia, often translated to mean the place built far away or the guidance house. In the Sumerian king list, the record is explicit and hauntingly simple. It states that after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. Before the Great Flood, before the rise of the famous empires of Ur or Babylon, there was only Eridu. It is the point of origin for the entire Anunnaki project on Earth. The narrator observes that for these early arrivals, the construction of this colony is a monumental task that requires the transformation of the very geography of the Delta. Enki is not merely a ruler but the master craftsman. The tablets depict him as a figure who rolls up his sleeves and engages with the raw materials of the earth. He is seen purifying the waters and clearing the channels. He marks out the boundaries of the first settlement using a measuring cord, a tool of precision that suggests an advanced understanding of urban planning and geometry. The construction is not an overnight miracle of magic, but a process of physical labor and engineering. The Anunnaki utilized the resources at hand, specifically the abundant clay and reeds of the marshes. They create the first bricks, baking them in kilns to provide a durability that the surrounding natural world lacks. The centerpiece of this first celestial colony is the Abzu, the house of the cosmic waters. This is the first temple, a structure designed to serve as both a residence for Enki and a laboratory for his work. The cuneiform accounts describe the temple as having foundations that reach deep into the earth, anchoring the structure to the watery abyss below. It is a building of immense complexity, decorated with precious metals and stones that the Anunnaki brought with them or extracted from the nearby mountains. Inside, the air is cooled by the proximity to the water, and the walls are said to shimmer like the scales of a fish. As the city of Eridu takes shape, the social structure of the Anunnaki becomes visible. The leadership, consisting of Enki and his high-ranking peers, oversees the grand strategy, but the physical work is carried out by a secondary group known as the Ijiji. In the time before the creation of humanity, these lesser deities are the ones who bear the burden of the labor. They are the ones who dig the canals, carry the baskets of silt, and ensure that the infrastructure of the colony remains functional. The tablets describe their work as a crushing weight. They toil under the hot sun of the Mesopotamian plain, transforming the chaotic marshes into a structured network of waterways and gardens. This labor is driven by a singular purpose that the texts hint at with increasing clarity. The Anunnaki are on Earth to extract resources. Specifically, they are interested in the precious metals that lie buried within the earth and the deep veins of the mountains. To facilitate this extraction, they need a sophisticated logistics network. Eridu is the first node in this network. It serves as a port where materials are gathered and processed before being sent to their final destination. The narrator notes that the scale of this operation is global in scope, even if its beginnings are confined to a small patch of land between the Tigris and the Euphrates. The environment of early Eridu is one of lush abundance, but it is also a place of intense isolation. The Anunnaki are alone on this planet. There are no villages to trade with, no other cultures to interact with, and no workforce to exploit. Every tool they use, every brick they lay, and every canal they dig is a product of their own effort and technology. The texts describe Enki riding in a boat called the Ibex of the Abzu, navigating the newly formed channels and bringing order to the wild creatures of the marsh. He is said to have filled the rivers with fish and the reed beds with birds, creating a sustainable ecosystem that could support the colony indefinitely. As the colony expands, the Anunnaki introduce the concept of the me. These are often described as divine decrees or sets of rules and technologies that govern the functions of civilization. The me include the arts of weaving, metalworking, law, and even the rituals of priesthood. These are the blueprints of society, brought from the stars and implemented at Eridu. The city becomes a living experiment where the laws of the universe are translated into the daily life of the colony. The narrator reflects on the seriousness of this endeavor. The Anunnaki are not just surviving on Earth, they are terraforming it and preparing it for a much larger destiny. The construction of Eridu is followed by the establishment of 4 other primary cities, each with a specific function. Bad Tibera is founded as a metalworking center. Larik and Sipar follow, and finally Shurapak is built. However, Eridu remains the most sacred and significant. It is the anchor of their presence. The cuneiform tablets record that the gods lived in these cities for tens of thousands of years, a time span that defies the human understanding of history, but fits the narrative of immortal or extremely long-lived beings from another world. In this pre-human era, the silence of the earth is broken only by the sounds of industry and the rhythmic chanting of the workers. The Ijiji continue to dig, their canals stretching further into the horizon, connecting the cities and draining the swamps. They create a landscape of geometric precision, a stark contrast to the winding, unpredictable paths of the natural rivers. This is the first time that the planet has been subjected to the will of a conscious, technological force. The Anunnaki view the Earth as a garden to be groomed and a mine to be stripped. The relationship between Enki and the Ijiji begins to show signs of strain as the centuries pass. The work of maintaining the colony is relentless. The heat of the Mesopotamian summer is brutal, and the constant dredging of the canals is exhausting. The tablets suggest that the Ijiji begin to complain, their voices rising in a murmur of discontent that will eventually lead to a crisis. But for now, the order of Eridu holds. The city stands as a beacon of celestial light in a world of shadows. The narrator looks upon the reconstructed ruins of Eridu, imagining the sight of the great ziggurat rising above the reed huts of the marshes. It must have been an imposing vision, a mountain of brick and gold standing where nothing but water had existed before. This was the first celestial colony, a bridgehead between the stars and the soil. It was here that the foundations of everything we know as civilization were first laid down, not by the hands of humans, but by the hands of those who came from above. The Anunnaki have established their home, and the Earth will never be the same again. The quiet, natural evolution of the planet has been interrupted by a grand design, a project that is only just beginning to unfold. The stage is set, the infrastructure is built, and the colonial machine of the Anunnaki is in full motion, humming with the energy of a civilization that operates on a scale of time and power that is truly beyond the human. Below the soaring palaces of the sky and the pristine cities established by the ruling Anunnaki, a different reality unfolds. This is the realm of the Abzu, a term that carries multiple meanings in the ancient Sumerian tongue. To some, it is the freshwater abyss that dwells beneath the earth, the mysterious domain of Enki. To others, it represents the deep places of the world, the subterranean veins where the raw materials of creation are locked away in stone and silt. It is here, far from the cool breezes of the celestial heights, that the true cost of the Anunnaki expansion is realized. The labor is not performed by the great gods who sit on their thrones of lapis lazuli. Instead, the crushing weight of this celestial project falls upon a secondary class of divine beings known as the Ijiji. In the traditional hierarchy of the Mesopotamian cosmos, the Ijiji are the younger gods, the rank and file of the heavenly host. They are powerful, immortal, and capable of feats that would dwarf any human endeavor. Yet they are subordinate. They are the workforce of the gods, the hands that must carry the baskets and the backs that must bend under the sun of a young and unforgiving earth. The texts describe this era as a time of immense environmental engineering. The planet is not yet the organized garden that the myths will later celebrate. It is a wild, chaotic landscape of overflowing marshes and untamed torrents. The Igigi are tasked with the fundamental shaping of the world. They are the ones who dig the beds of the great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. These are not merely streams, but massive arteries of life that require constant maintenance and dredging. The Sumerian tablets tell us that the Igigi toil at this task for 40 periods of time, often interpreted as 40 shars, with a single shar representing 3,600 years. This is a scale of labor that is incomprehensible to the fleeting human mind. For tens of thousands of years, the Igigi serve as the cosmic laborers, ensuring that the water flows where the ruling Anunnaki decree. Imagine the scene through the lens of a silent observer. The heat of the Mesopotamian basin is relentless, shimmering over the horizon in waves of distortion. In the mud and the clay, the Igigi use heavy tools to carve out the canals. They lift baskets of earth, heavy with the weight of the world, and carry them to the embankments. This is not the work of a single afternoon or a single lifetime. It is a cycle of exertion that spans the rise and fall of geological epochs. Every shovelful of soil is a testament to the demands of the Anunnaki leadership, who remain in their comfortable heights, overseeing the progress from a distance. The Abzu is not just about water and irrigation. It is also the site of the deep mines. The texts suggest that the Anunnaki have a specific need for the riches of the earth, particularly gold and precious minerals. The Igigi are sent into the dark, cramped shafts of the subterranean world to extract these resources. The atmosphere in these depths is heavy and stagnant. The only light comes from the faint glow of divine presence or the primitive illumination provided by their tools. Here, the physical toll of the work becomes even more pronounced. The Igigi are divine beings, yet they are subjected to the grime, the dust, and the claustrophobic pressure of the deep earth. The narrative of the Atrahasis epic provides a vivid account of this struggle. It describes the gods as having to endure the toil and the hardship. The language used is visceral. It speaks of the heavy baskets, the groan of the earth, and the exhaustion that begins to seep into the immortal spirits of the Igigi. Even an immortal has a limit. While they do not age or die of natural causes, they are susceptible to the psychological wear of repetition and the physical strain of endless exertion. The monotony of the task is perhaps the greatest burden of all. Day after day, year after year, century after century, the Igigi perform the same motions. They dig, they carry, they dump. They dig, they carry, they dump. The ruling Anunnaki, led by the stern and uncompromising Enlil, show little sympathy for the plight of their subordinates. To Enlil, the order of the cosmos depends on the completion of this work. The infrastructure of the earth must be perfected to support the divine presence. The gold must be harvested. The canals must be clear. Any delay is seen as a failure of duty. This creates a widening rift within the divine community. The Igigi look up toward the mountains and the sky where the senior gods reside in luxury, and they begin to feel the first sparks of resentment. The environment itself is a character in this drama. The earth of this pre-human era is a place of raw power. Volcanic activity, massive floods, and shifting tectonic plates make the work of the Igigi even more difficult. They are not just digging in soft sand. They are fighting against the primal forces of a world that is still finding its form. Every time they complete a canal, a seasonal flood might wash it away. Every time they establish a mine, the shifting earth might threaten to collapse the tunnels. It is a constant battle against the elements, a struggle to impose order on a chaotic wilderness. The texts mention that the Ijiji groan under the weight of the work. This groaning is more than just a sound. It is a collective expression of a burgeoning consciousness. They are beginning to realize that their immortality is being spent in service to those who do not share their burden. The disparity between the ruling class and the laboring class is becoming untenable. While Enki, the master of the Abzu, may have a closer relationship with the Ijiji and a better understanding of their suffering, he is still part of the ruling council. He provides the designs and the technical knowledge, but he does not carry the baskets himself. The passage of time in these Sumerian accounts is one of the most striking elements. We are accustomed to history being measured in decades or perhaps centuries, but the Sumerian scribes speak in units that suggest a much longer view of existence. To the Ijiji, 1,000 years is merely a season of work. Yet, when you stack those seasons one upon the other for dozens of millennia, even the endurance of a god begins to fray. The sheer scale of the project, the transformation of an entire planet into a managed estate, is a task that would require such vast timelines. As the ages of the Abzu grind on, the atmosphere among the Ijiji shifts from one of dutiful service to one of quiet desperation. They talk among themselves in the shadows of the trenches. They whisper about the injustice of their situation. The heavy baskets, once a symbol of their contribution to the cosmic order, have become symbols of their enslavement. The tools of their labor, the spades and the pickaxes, are now viewed with hatred. They look at their calloused hands and their tired limbs and they wonder why they, who are also gods, must live like beasts of burden. The silence of the early world is broken only by the rhythmic sound of their labor and the occasional command from an Anunnaki overseer. The overseers are often depicted as harsh, enforcing the quotas and the deadlines with a cold indifference. They are the middle management of the divine realm, ensuring that the will of Enlil is carried out without question. Their presence serves as a constant reminder to the Ijiji of their lower status. The social stratification of the gods is now fully established, and it is built upon the sweat and the struggle of the many for the benefit of the few. Deep within the Abzu, the Ijiji continue to delve. They uncover the secrets of the earth, pulling forth the metals that will be used to adorn the temples of the high gods, and perhaps even to power the advanced technologies that the texts occasionally hint at. The gold is purified, the silver is refined, and the precious stones are polished. But none of this wealth belongs to the ones who find it. It is all transported upward, away from the darkness, to the bright world above. The story of the Ijiji is a foundational myth that explores the themes of labor, class, and rebellion. It suggests that even before the creation of humanity, the world was a place of struggle. The peace of the gods was not a natural state, but one that was maintained through the exploitation of a subordinate group. The Abzu, while a source of life and wealth, was also a place of suffering. This period of toil sets the stage for the most significant turning point in the Sumerian creation story. The tension is reaching a boiling point. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and the sound of sharpening blades. The Ijiji are no longer just workers. They are a community on the verge of an awakening. They have spent ages in the deep, and they have learned the secrets of the earth. They have built the world that the Anunnaki enjoy, and now they are starting to ask the most dangerous question of all. What would happen if they simply stopped? What would happen if they dropped their baskets and walked away from the canals? The foundations of the Anunnaki Empire are built on the labor of the Ijiji, and those foundations are beginning to tremble. The ages of toil are nearing their end, not because the work is finished, but because the workers can no longer bear the weight. The stage is moving away from the quiet industry of the early Earth and toward a confrontation that will change the course of history forever. The burden of the Ijiji has become a fire that will soon consume the peace of the gods. The world of the distant past is not a garden. It is a raw, unyielding canvas of silt and stone. Under the unrelenting gaze of the sun, the landscape of southern Mesopotamia stretches out in a featureless expanse of dry earth. There are no palm groves, no swaying fields of barley, and no cities of brick. There is only the silence of a planet waiting to be shaped. High above, the senior Anunnaki look down from their celestial seats, their minds focused on a single objective. They require order. They require a world that flows according to a divine blueprint. To achieve this, they turn to the Ijiji, the younger deities who serve as the hands of the celestial court. The task set before these lesser gods is monumental. They are tasked with the excavation of the great rivers, the veins of the world that will one day carry the lifeblood of civilization. This is not a project measured in years or decades, but in epochs. The Sumerian tablets describe a time when the Tigris and Euphrates do not exist as we know them. They are shallow, choked with debris, or perhaps non-existent in the vast alluvial plains. The Ijiji descend into the heat, their ethereal forms pressed against the weight of the physical world. They carry baskets. They wield picks of bronze and silver. They begin the long, agonizing process of carving the earth. The sheer scale of this engineering feat is difficult to comprehend from a human perspective. Imagine the movement of millions of tons of earth, not with modern machinery, but with the raw power of divine endurance. The Ijiji dig. They widen the banks. They deepen the channels until the ground gives way to the subterranean reservoirs of the Apsu. This is the domain of Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters. He is the master architect, the one who drafted the maps of these liquid highways. He walks among the laborers, his eyes fixed on the flow of the currents. He understands the hydraulics of the world, how the seasonal melt from the northern mountains must be channeled to prevent the destruction of the land. As the centuries pass, the work becomes a rhythmic, grinding cycle of exertion. The sun rises and sets over the bent backs of the gods. The tablets tell us that for 40 periods they bore the work. These periods are often interpreted as vast stretches of time, perhaps thousands of years. During this era, the landscape begins to transform. The marshes emerge. The stagnant pools are drained into the newly formed riverbeds. The soil, once parched and cracked, begins to soak up the overflow. This is the birth of the Fertile Crescent, but it is a birth bought through the sweat of the divine. The environment undergoes a radical shift. Where there was once only dust, there is now the shimmer of water reflecting the midday sun. The engineering of the waterways is not merely a matter of digging trenches. It is the creation of a complex system of levees, dikes, and irrigation canals that will eventually allow life to flourish. The Ijiji are responsible for every turn of the river, every bank that keeps the floodwaters at bay. They are the first surveyors, the first hydraulic engineers of the planet. But the work is not without its cost. The physical toll on the Ijiji is immense. In the Mesopotamian accounts, their suffering is described with visceral clarity. Their eyes are heavy with fatigue. Their limbs ache from the constant lifting of the heavy soil. They pile the excavated earth into great mounds, creating the hills and mountains that break the horizon. Every peak in the distance is a testament to their labor, a literal monument to the burden they carry. The silence of the world is broken only by the sound of their tools hitting the earth and the heavy breathing of those who cannot rest. Enki watches from his temple in Eridu, the city that rises as a hub for this massive undertaking. He is the Lord of the deep, the one who knows the secrets of the earth. He sees the strain on the faces of the Igigi, yet the project must continue. The Anunnaki in the heights, led by the stern Enlil, demand results. For the senior gods, the earth is a resource to be managed, a garden to be groomed for their pleasure and sustenance. They do not feel the weight of the baskets. They do not feel the sting of the salt water on their skin. To them, the rivers are lines on a map, necessary conduits for the manifestation of their will. The environmental impact of this work is staggering. As the waterways are established, the climate of the region begins to shift. The introduction of vast amounts of surface water creates a microclimate, encouraging the growth of reeds and the arrival of waterfowl. The world is becoming greener, softer. The harsh edges of the primordial earth are being rounded by the flow of the rivers. This is the era of the great preparation. The Anunnaki are building a stage, though the actors who will eventually inhabit it have not yet been conceived. The engineering of the Tigris and Euphrates is also a symbolic act. In the ancient mind, water is life, but it is also chaos. By taming the rivers, the Anunnaki are asserting their dominance over the primordial forces of the universe. They are imposing a divine geometry on the wild nature of the world. Each canal is a statement of intent. Each levee is a barrier against the return of the void. The Igigi, however, do not see the poetry in their work. They see only the endless horizon and the next basket of silt. The pressure continues to mount. The tablets describe how the Igigi began to lament their fate. They speak of their work as a fire, something that burns through their spirit. They have been digging for thousands of years, and the end is not in sight. The rivers are deep now, and the water flows steadily from the mountains to the sea. But the maintenance of these systems is a task that never ends. Silt accumulates. Banks erode. The cycle of labor is eternal. The Igigi are trapped in a masterpiece of their own making, a world that requires their constant attention just to remain stable. As the sun sets over the newly formed delta, the reflection on the water is a deep, bruised purple. The landscape is beautiful, but it is a beauty born of exhaustion. The Igigi look to the stars, perhaps searching for their own origin, or perhaps looking for the celestial chariots of their masters. They are alone in the heat, alone in the mud. The great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, flow silently toward the horizon, oblivious to the divine suffering that carved their paths. The architecture of the deep is complete, but the architects are broken. The engineering of the waterways was the first great act of planetary transformation. It was the moment when the Earth was forcibly moved from its natural state into a managed environment. The Anunnaki, through the hands of the Igigi, proved that they could reshape a world. They proved that they could master the elements and bend the very geography of the planet to their desires. But in doing so, they sowed the seeds of a conflict that would eventually change the course of history. The burden of the work was no longer just a physical weight. It had become a psychological poison, a resentment that simmered in the hearts of the laborers as they stood in the cooling waters of the rivers they had made. The scale of the project remains visible even today, buried beneath the sands and the modern channels. The ancient courses of the rivers, the old dikes, and the massive earthen mounds are the fingerprints of this pre-human era. When we look at the ruins of Mesopotamia, we are looking at the remnants of a divine construction site. We are looking at the results of a labor so intense that it pushed the gods themselves to the brink of rebellion. The waterways were the beginning, the foundation of everything that was to follow. They were the first step in the grand design of the Anunnaki, a design that would soon require a new kind of laborer, one who could carry the basket when the gods could no longer bear the weight. The silence returns to the plains as the Ijiji pause for a brief moment of rest. The water continues to flow, a constant, low murmur against the banks. The engineering is sound. The rivers are deep. The world is ready. But as the Ijiji look at their worn hands and their tired shadows, the peace of the world feels fragile. The great deep has been opened, and the waters of the Apsu are now under the control of the gods. Yet, the cost of this control is a debt that is coming due. The architects of the deep have finished their work, but the story of their labor is only the beginning of a much larger struggle for the future of the earth. The rivers reflect the moonlight, two silver ribbons cutting through the dark earth. They are the pride of Enki and the bane of the Ijiji. In the halls of the Anunnaki, there is celebration for the success of the irrigation, but in the trenches, there is only the cold reality of the next day. The engineering of the ancient waterways was a triumph of divine will, but it was also the catalyst for the greatest uprising the heavens would ever witness. The stage is set, the rivers are flowing, and the ancient world stands on the precipice of a transformation that no one, not even the wise Enki, could fully foresee. This was the work of the gods before the time of man, a period of sweat and stone that carved the very shape of the cradle of civilization. One can almost hear the rhythmic strike of the tools against the riverbeds, a sound that echoes across the millennia, reminding us that the paradise we inherited was built on the foundation of an ancient and exhausting toil. Underneath the soil of Iraq and Syria, the evidence of this colossal undertaking remains, waiting for those who know how to read the landscape of the gods. The canals are more than just water. They are the physical manifestation of a hierarchy that was beginning to fracture under its own weight. The Ijiji look at the water and see their own reflection, and for the first time, they begin to wonder if they were meant for more than the mud. For 2,500 years, the order of the cosmos remains unchanged. The sun rises over the jagged peaks of the Zagros Mountains, and it sets behind the vast, shimmering horizon of the Persian Gulf. In between, there is only the rhythm of the spade hitting the earth. The Ijiji, the younger and lesser deities of the celestial hierarchy, have become the sinews and muscle of a planet in transition. They are the architects of a geography that did not exist before their arrival. They have carved the Tigris and the Euphrates from the raw crust of the earth, leading the life-giving waters into the parched plains of Sumer. They have built the foundations of the great cities, stacking millions of sun-dried bricks to form the bases of temples that reach toward the heavens where their masters reside. But time is a weight that eventually crushes even the immortal. To a human, a year is a cycle of seasons. To an Ijiji, a millennium is merely a shift in the long day of their servitude. As the third millennium of their labor approaches, the air in the deep trenches becomes thick with more than just dust and heat. It becomes heavy with the weight of resentment. The Sumerian tablets describe this period not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, agonizing realization. The reflection they saw in the water, the one that first prompted them to question their purpose, has now become a constant companion. They look at their hands, calloused and stained with the red clay of the earth, and then they look toward the heights of the Eker, the mountain house of Enlil, where the great gods feast in cool, shaded halls. The observational record of the Atrahasis epic provides a chilling account of how a god decides to stop being a servant. It begins in the dark. It begins with whispers behind the high embankments of the canals. In the flickering shadows of the labor camps, the Ijiji gather. These are not the chaotic gatherings of mortals, but the focused, intense deliberations of divine beings pushed to their breaking point. They speak of the unfairness of the burden. They speak of Anu, the High Father, who remains in the distant heights of heaven, far removed from the grit of the trenches. They speak of Enlil, the Lord of the air, whose commands fall like lashes upon their backs. And they speak of Enki, the clever one, who watches them from his watery abyss with an expression they cannot quite decipher. Is it pity they see in Enki, or is it the cold calculation of a master who knows his machine is about to break? The decision is made not with a cry, but with the setting of a flame. One by one, the Ijiji cast down their tools. The heavy silver spades that have shaped the world are thrown into the dust. The baskets used to carry the heavy silt are piled into heaps. This is the first strike in the history of the world, and its scale is cosmic. They do not merely walk away from their posts. They take the very instruments of their oppression and set them ablaze. The sight of burning divinity is something the world has never seen. The flames do not just consume wood and fiber. They represent the destruction of the old order. The smoke rises high into the Mesopotamian night, a black pillar that signals the end of the age of the lesser gods as laborers. The narrator observes the scene as the sun begins to peer over the horizon. The Ijiji have formed a massive, silent procession. They are no longer a disorganized workforce. They are an army. They march toward the city of Nippur, the religious and political heart of the Anunnaki dominion. Their destination is the Eker, the temple of Enlil. In the pre-dawn light, the golden facades of the temple glint, but the gods inside are unaware that the foundation of their luxury has just vanished. The Ijiji surround the temple. They do not shout. They do not batter the gates. They simply wait. There is a terrifying power in the silence of 10,000 gods standing in unison, their eyes fixed on the doors of the one who gave the orders. Inside the Eker, the silence of the city is broken by a frantic guard. Kalkal, the gatekeeper of Enlil, is the first to witness the impossible. He looks out from the parapets and sees the horizon crowded with the very beings who should be miles away, deep in the mud of the southern plains. He sees the glow of the torches. He sees the broken tools scattered like bones in the distance. Panic takes hold of him. He rushes through the corridors, his sandals slapping against the polished stone, until he reaches the private chambers of the Lord of the Storm. Enlil is a god of action and authority, yet the tablets describe his reaction to this news with a surprising degree of human vulnerability. When he is shaken awake and told that his house is surrounded, his first instinct is not anger, but a profound, chilling fear. He looks out and sees the faces of his kin, the Ijiji, illuminated by the fire of their own rebellion. He realizes in that moment that the hierarchy he sits atop is fragile. The air itself seems to tremble with the collective will of the strikers. Enlil does not go out to face them. Instead, he orders the gates barred. He retreats into the inner sanctum, calling for a state of emergency. The tension of the documentary narrative tightens as the Great Council is summoned. This is a moment of extreme geopolitical crisis in the divine realm. Anu is called down from his celestial throne. He descends in his brilliance, his presence usually enough to quiet any storm, but even he is sobered by the sight of the besieged Eker. Enki, the Lord of the Deep, arrives from Eridu, his eyes moving over the crowd of Ijiji with a deep, silent understanding. The three greatest powers of the universe are now gathered in a room, while outside, The very beings who sustain their existence demand an audience. The dialogue recorded in the ancient texts is sharp and revelatory. Enlil, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror, demands to know who the leader of the rebellion is. He wants a name. He wants someone to punish. He asks his gatekeeper, who went out to speak to them, and the answer he receives is the most dangerous one possible. There is no single leader. The Ijiji speak as one. They tell the messenger that every single one of them has declared war. They say that the labor is too much. They say the heartbeat of the earth has become a drum of pain, and they will not strike another blow for the sake of the Anunnaki. The scene is one of a total stalemate. The Anunnaki cannot force the Ijiji back into the trenches. To do so would require a war that would likely destroy the very planet they are trying to cultivate. Yet the work must be done. The canals will silt up. The crops will fail. The divine order will collapse into starvation and chaos. The documentary lens focuses on the faces of the three great gods as they weigh the cost of their existence. Enlil wants to use force. He suggests that Anu return to heaven and bring down a weapon to annihilate the rebels. He is the law, and to him, a breach of the law is a breach of reality itself. However, Anu and Enki are more pragmatic. They look out at the Ijiji and see not just rebels, but a mirror of their own necessity. Anu admits that the grievance of the Ijiji is heavy. He acknowledges that the work they have been doing is indeed beyond the endurance of any being, even a god. This admission is a turning point in the history of the cosmos. It is the moment when the ruling class acknowledges that their system is unsustainable. The documentary tone remains somber as it highlights the gravity of this failure. The gods have reached a dead end. It is here that Enki, the god of wisdom and the deep waters, begins to formulate a plan. He sees a way to resolve the conflict without a war, but it is a solution that will change the nature of the earth forever. He listens to the cries of the Ijiji, and he looks at the clay of the riverbanks. He realizes that if the gods are to be free from labor, something else must take their place. Something that can bear the heat. Something that can handle the spade. Something that can be molded from the very earth it is meant to serve. The mutiny of the stars has created a vacuum. The lesser gods have walked away from the machines of creation, and those machines are grinding to a halt. As the Ijiji stand firm around the walls of Nippur, refusing to move, refusing to serve, the stage is set for the most controversial and significant act in the Sumerian mythos. The rebellion of the Ijiji is the catalyst for the creation of humanity. The narrator leaves us with the image of the burning tools and the silent, defiant gods. The old world is dead. The gods are tired. And in the mind of Enki, the first blueprint of a human being is beginning to take shape. The mutiny was not the end of the story, but the violent, necessary birth of a new kind of existence. The stars have refused to serve, and therefore, the dust of the earth must be made to walk. The great assembly of the gods sits in a state of suspended animation. The air in the celestial council chamber is thick with the scent of ozone and the weight of an impossible decision. The lower deities, the Ijiji, have laid down their tools. They have burned their spades and broken their baskets. The cosmic infrastructure, the very veins of the earth that provide sustenance to the heavens, is beginning to wither. Enlil, the lord of the air and the executor of divine will, watches the smoke rise from the rebellion with a growing, cold fury. To Enlil, the rebellion is a betrayal of the natural hierarchy. To him, the solution is simple and brutal, the total eradication of the dissenters. But in the shadows of the council, where the deep waters of the Abzu whisper against the foundations of the world, another mind is at work. Enki, the Lord of wisdom and the master of the primordial deep, does not look at the rebellion with the eyes of a soldier. He looks at it with the eyes of an engineer. He understands that the Ijiji have reached a point of exhaustion that no amount of punishment can cure. A system that relies on the perpetual suffering of its architects is a system destined for collapse. Enki steps forward into the center of the hall. He is a figure of fluidity and nuance, often at odds with the rigid morality of his brother Enlil. He carries with him the secrets of the Me, the ancient blueprints of civilization and biological existence. He speaks not of war, but of a biological pivot. He proposes a solution that is as elegant as it is terrifying. He suggests that the gods do not need to work, nor do the Ijiji need to suffer. They simply need a surrogate. They need a creature capable of understanding a command but lacking the divine status that would make labor an insult. The proposal creates a ripple of unease through the assembly. The gods have never before considered sharing the spark of existence with the dust of the ground. Enki argues that the earth is already teeming with life, a raw and untamed biological canvas. Deep in the heart of the African wilderness, and along the marshy banks of the Euphrates, there are creatures that walk upright. They possess the form of the gods but lack the intellect, the soul, and the capacity for organized labor. They are part of the natural landscape, as much as the river or the stone. Enki proposes a synthesis. He suggests a genetic bridge between the divine and the terrestrial. By mixing the essence of a god with the biological material of these primitive creatures, they can create a hybrid. This being will have the strength of the wild and the intellect of the heavens. It will be the Lulu, the primitive worker. It will take the yoke of the Ijiji upon its shoulders and ensure that the rivers flow and the temples are fed. The council is silent, weighing the implications of such an act. To create life is the ultimate transgression and the ultimate triumph. Enlil is skeptical, fearing that a creature with the blood of the gods might one day demand the seat of the gods. But the crisis is too great to ignore. The starvation of the heavens is a more immediate threat than a hypothetical future rebellion. The order is given. Enki is to proceed, but he will not work alone. He calls upon the mother goddess Ninhursag, also known as Beliali, the mistress of the womb. If Enki is the architect of the plan, Ninhursag is the master builder. She is the one who understands the delicate alchemy of the flesh. They retreat from the heights of the celestial city to the house of Shimti, a place that the Sumerian texts describe in terms that sound hauntingly like a modern biological laboratory. The word Shimti itself translates to the house where the breath of life is breathed in. The process is not a simple act of magic. The tablets describe a methodical, agonizing series of experiments. This is the heart of the Enki paradox. To create a worker, one must grant it enough intelligence to be useful, but not so much that it becomes dangerous. The gods require a being that can maintain the irrigation systems, harvest the crops, and process the gold, yet remain subservient to its creators. The texts provide a vivid, almost clinical account of the ritual. A minor god must be sacrificed to provide the catalyst. The chosen is Geshtu-e, a deity described as having the intelligence or the spirit of understanding. This is not a random execution. It is a calculated extraction. The blood of Geshtu-e is mixed with the clay of the earth. In the context of ancient symbolism, clay represents the biological matter of the planet, the carbon-based life that already exists. The blood represents the DNA, the divine code that carries the instructions for consciousness and higher order thinking. Ninhursag takes the mixture into her own being, or perhaps into a series of artificial incubation chambers, which the texts refer to as the 14 wombs. 7 are for the creation of males and 7 for females. The process is fraught with failure. The ancient records do not shy away from the darker side of this creation myth. They speak of the early versions of the Lulu that were not quite right. Some had bodies that were weak, others had minds that could not grasp the concept of speech or tools. There are descriptions of creatures with sightless eyes or crippled limbs, the tragic byproducts of a divine experiment that had not yet perfected its formula. Enki and Ninhursag iterate. They refine the genetic cocktail. They adjust the balance between the terrestrial and the divine. The tension in the house of Shimti is palpable as they wait for the gestation period to end. The Igigi are watching from the distance, their future hanging on the success of this biological gamble. If Enki fails, the Igigi return to their chains. If he succeeds, a new species will be born into a life of servitude. Finally, the moment of the first successful birth arrives. The texts describe Ninhursag holding the newborn creature aloft. It is the Adamu, the first of the human line. It is a creature of dual nature, a biological anomaly. It possesses the rounded ears and smooth skin of the gods, but its heart beats with the rhythm of the earth. It opens its eyes and looks upon its creators, and in that gaze, the Enki paradox is fully realized. The gods have their worker. The crisis is averted. The Igigi are set free to return to the celestial spheres, their long era of toil finally at an end. But the price of this freedom is the creation of a sentient mirror. The Adamu and his descendants are not mere animals. Because they carry the blood of Geshtui, they carry the potential for the very things that the gods cherish: creativity, love, ambition, and, most dangerously, the desire for autonomy. The house of Shimti becomes a factory of life. The 14 wombs produce the first generation of laborers, and these are deployed to the mines of the Abzu and the fields of Sumer. The transition is seamless. The infrastructure of the world begins to hum once more. The gold flows again to the heavens, and the cities of the gods are rebuilt with a splendor that exceeds anything seen before the rebellion. Yet, even as the gods celebrate their newfound leisure, Enki watches his creation with a complicated mix of pride and apprehension. He has solved the cosmic crisis, but he has introduced a permanent instability into the universe. The Lulu are multiplying. They are learning. They are beginning to speak to one another in the language of the gods. They look up at the ziggurats and the celestial chariots not with the blank stare of a beast, but with the inquisitive mind of a cousin. The documentary evidence of the Sumerian tablets suggests that this period was one of immense productivity but growing psychological unease among the divine elite. Enlil remains distant and cold, viewing the humans as nothing more than biological machines that require maintenance and occasional culling. Enki, however, finds himself drawn to his creation. He is the father who cannot help but love the child he designed for a life of hardship. The Enki paradox is the realization that you cannot create a servant with the mind of a god and expect it to remain a servant forever. The genetic solution was perfect for the immediate crisis, but it laid the foundation for the ultimate conflict between the creators and the created. As the humans toil in the heat of the Mesopotamian sun, they carry within their cells the stolen fire of the heavens. They are the walking legacy of a divine compromise, a species born of a labor strike and a laboratory experiment. The dust of the earth has indeed been made to walk, and as it walks, it begins to wonder why it should ever have to stop.